So here I am today at Black Mountain Reserve, which is one of my favourite reserves in Canberra in Australia. The reserve is right in the middle of the city. It's about 400 hectares of dry sclerophyll forest and heathland, and it's very easy to get to adjacent to the city. From the southern side facing the lake, there's not much access, and on the eastern side facing the city, the best access is from adjacent to the Botanic Gardens. If you have a car, there's two access points on the northern and on the western side, and you can park beside the freeway and walk in. And within the reserve itself, there's a whole range of loop walks, which can be 1 kilometre, 2 kilometres, 4 kilometres, etc. When you get here, you can see where you might want to walk. The best area for the flattest area to walk is in the northern part of the reserve. Around the mountain itself, it tends to get rather steep, and the walking trails are a little more difficult to follow. Another important access point to birdwatching in Black Mountain Reserve is to go to the top of Black Mountain, and behind me here you can see Black Mountain Tower, and it's a prominent feature you can see from all around Canberra. There's a summit road that takes you to that tower, and there's lots of trails around the top of the mountain where you can go birdwatching. That's in fact where button quail have been seen, so it's an important spot to go and check out. It's quite steep to walk down from there, so you may want to base yourself from a vehicle at the top of the mountain, have a walk about, and then go to the various other access points that are around the reserve subsequently. It's been great doing this little clip about Black Mountain Nature Reserve today, because I actually have a personal affection for this particular reserve. Back in 1977, when I was doing my honours studies at ANU as part of my science degree, I selected this reserve to do some bird studies. And what I showed was we could do different sorts of transects, walking transects, standing transects, searching transects, to actually study the number of birds. And back in 1977, this was a bit novel. We didn't know how to count birds. And of course, these days, we do this all the time. But when I was a young student, this was something new, and this is the reserve that I did that study in. So when I walk around this reserve, I think of those days that I spent many hours here back in the winter of 1977, watching the birds and counting them and working out how we could study birds in the future. So here I am in Black Mountain Reserve. It has quite a range of different sorts of vegetation types, but they're usually all eucalypt forest types. We have these stringy barks like this one on my right, and we have the smooth bark trees like the one on my left. Depending on which slope you're on, because the reserve faces west, east, north and south, different species of eucalypt will dominate. So as you walk around the various trails within the reserve, you'll find different species of eucalypts in different spots, and of course check out the hollows in each of them. This particular stringy bark on this side has shown evidence of fire, and that's the other thing you need to watch out for in Black Mountain Reserve. Patches of the reserve will be burnt at different times. This reserve is very important for orchids, and so the park managers are concerned about maintaining different age groups of fire so that the orchids are protected, but this also helps the birds. So watch out for patches that have been burnt and check out the birds in those areas as well. So here in Black Mountain Reserve, we have lots of the typical sclerophyll forest birds that we get on the southern tablelands in this part of Australia. Sclerophyll forest, by that I mean the eucalyptus forest, the gum tree forests. Here it's a fairly dry forest, so the sorts of species that we're likely to get here, or could get here, include typical species like scarlet robins, a wide range of honeyeaters like the yellow-faced honeyeater, the white-naped honeyeaters. Here on the top of the mountain, recently there's been good records of button quail have been seen there, a range of species of parrot, including that white cockatoo that's calling in the background, lots of rosellas here, and some of the other more drier forest birds, potentially white faces, diamond firetails and the like. So here I am in Black Mountain Reserve, and I'm in a patch of heathland. Now you might wonder why I'm being filmed with telegraph poles behind me in the middle of a nature reserve and why that's important. Well, it's vitally important, as it turns out, for birds here. Many years ago, before this area was a nature reserve, the power lines were put in. The reserve was then declared, and it was decided that they wouldn't clear the area underneath the power lines with machinery. They would clear out the eucalypts that were growing up through the vegetation by hand. And what that's meant for the last 50 years is all along this power line, right through the reserve, we effectively have an artificial heath. And this artificial heath is actually a very important area for some species of birds. Recently, we recorded heathwrens here, which are a very rare bird in the ACT, and they love this area underneath these power lines. 50 years ago, a friend of mine, Harry Bell, did a study here, and he found one of the most interesting places in the whole of this reserve for birds are the areas along the edge of this heathland where the forest and the heath come together under these power lines that you can see behind me. So if you're bird watching in Black Mountain Reserve, you must come and check out the heathland underneath the power lines.